Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer, in that order. Welcome everyone from the files of Adventures in Card Dealing. We're going to look at the collection I bought with Mike Moynihan about 5-ish months ago or so. I labeled the Grail collection. It's one of the largest collections I was ever a part of purchasing. And I did a video on it shortly after we bought it, just sort of discussing the story behind buying it. And I'll recap that in the first half of this video. But we've just finished selling off the collection. We're basically done selling through it. So we have all the numbers. And in the second half of this video, I'll go over all the numbers, how we did, how Mike did individually, how I did individually, how we did as a team, and all that. So it all started with John Keating, shown here on the left during his podcast, That 70s Card Show. And he gets contacted by his local card store in the Philadelphia area. And that store is in the middle of buying a massive vintage collection. And the store really focuses on modern cards. Like they don't know a whole lot about vintage, but they know enough to know that there's quite a lot of value here. But they don't really want to deal with it. You know, it's a lot of cards. So they're really hoping to sort of buy this collection and more or less flip it. John comes by, takes a look, and is just blown away by how many great cards there are. He sees one card in particular, a 1933 DeLong Lou Gehrig, and he knows that Mike Moynihan, shown here on the right, baseball collector, who, you know, they're good friends, and he knows that that's basically his dream card. So he calls up Mike, and next thing you know, things get rolling, and, you know, Mike is showing interest in buying the entire collection. Now, neither Mike nor John are dealers. They're both basically pure collectors. And this is not a collection you would just buy as a collector and goof around with. This is a, you know, expensive collection. You would need to sell off a chunk of it or a lot of it to get your money back. But they've both been around the block. I mean, Mike knows how to sell cards, so does John. But Mike's never taken on a collection of this size with the intent to resell it. Mike texted me some pictures of the collection. Mike and I were friends at that point. And he was just texting me like, hey, check out this collection I'm looking at. Here are some of the actual pictures he texted me. You can see there's a 39 play ball Joe DiMaggio in the lower right, 39 play ball Ted Williams rookie in the upper right, 40 play ball Christy Mathewson, Stan Musial Bowman rookie, is an Al Kaline rookie, Ernie Banks rookie. But this was the picture that was really exciting. A whole bunch of 1933 Goudeys in the bottom row, including 5 Babe Ruths, including 2 number 53s in the lower left, 3 Lou Gehrigs, a bunch of other Hall of Famers. And then in the top row is a whole bunch of 1933 DeLongs, which is a really, really rare set, like I mentioned, that Lou Gehrig is from, which is, again, Mike's dream card. And when I heard that it was in the Philadelphia area, I said, hey, you know, if you need any help, I'd be happy to come up and take a look, or help you, you know, price out cards or whatever. I'm in Baltimore. It's in about an hour and a half. And Mike's all the way in Texas. So, you know, whenever he comes out and looks at it or ultimately buys it, he's going to have to fly across the country to do that. And I said, yeah, if you need any help, I'd be happy to drive up. We talk back and forth, and Mike decides that he actually would like to bring me on the deal. He offers to bring me in on the deal as a 1/3 partner. Basically, he's going to be 2/3. I'm going to be 1/3. I accept immediately, and am very grateful that he brought me in, and yeah, we go from there. Now I'm going to back up just a sec. The card store owner, like I said, was a modern guy, but he knew enough about vintage, and he graded 13 of the top cards from the collection. He sent them to SGC. This photo shows 10 of the 13 cards that he got graded. You can see the 3 Gehrig rookies, 3 of the 33 Goudey Babe Ruths, a couple other Gehrigs, the Ted Williams rookie in the lower right. He also got this Ruth graded, and this one got an SGC 4. And the biggest card of all was on the right in this picture, the number 53 Ruth that got a 4.5, and also the Ernie Banks, which got a 7. So he got those 13 cards graded, and that did a couple things for him. It, you know, one, sort of confirmed that everything was original and not fakes and not altered, but it also sort of added value when he went to, you know, flip the entire collection. So Mike and the card store owner start talking about price, and the card store owner is set on $120,000 for the entire collection, and he says he's not going to budge off that price. Now, I've seen Mike in action. He can negotiate, but in this case, he could not get the card store owner to come down at all. $120,000 was the price. Mike and I discuss it, and, you know, we basically say there's you know, almost $120,000 in those 13 graded cards alone in value, and there's tons and tons of other stuff. So basically, this was a no-brainer. We agree that we're going to go ahead and buy the collection at $120,000. So at this point, neither Mike nor I had seen any of the cards in person, but John Keating had. And in fact, the collection was being kept at John's house, minus the 13 graded cards. And John was texting us pictures of the collection as we went along, and that's how we were able to determine that $120,000 was a price we'd be willing to pay. Now, the card store owner says he was only willing to take cash, and so you know, Mike has to come up with $80,000 in cash. I need to come up with $40,000 in cash, so 2/3, 1/3. And, you know, most banks will not let you just walk into the bank and withdraw $40,000 in cash. They have limits and rules against that sort of thing. So I've learned that over time. You know, when you're trying to make large withdrawals, it's better to piece it out and do like 10,000 a day for as many days as you need. which is exactly what I did. Although that meant on the day we were actually going to look at the collection, I needed to make the final $10,000 withdrawal. But while I was at the branch that last day, the fourth day, trying to take out the final 10,000, I was told by the teller that my account had been flagged for suspicious activity, which, I mean, I guess because I'm withdrawing $10,000 each day, once a day for 3-4 days in a row here, that got flagged. I had to talk to the branch manager and make a couple calls, and I had to answer a whole bunch of security questions and show multiple forms of ID and all that. And ultimately it got settled, but it took, a good hour or so. And I was actually almost late getting to John Keating's house to do the deal, but actually had left a little, cushion time-wise, so I actually made it just in time. So I get to John's house, and, Mike's already there. He's flown in. And, John's already confirmed all the cards are there, minus the 13 graded cards, so there wasn't a whole lot to do there. The card store owner showed up just a few minutes later with the 13 graded cards. We took a quick look and confirmed all that. We handed him over the $120,000 in cash in like a bunch of different sort of bank notes of, generally like 10,000 each. He just put it into a shoebox and said, cool. And, the transaction itself was very quick and simple and easy. We all shook hands and everyone was happy, and, he took off. And, now Mike, John, and I are in John's basement, which is like a sports card haven, man cave type thing. And we had sort of all day to figure out how to split up these cards, as Mike was going to be flying out the next morning. So just to give some specs on the collection, I would say there was roughly 50,000 cards. We didn't do any sort of exact count or even a rough count, but I'm gonna estimate there are about 50,000 cards. It ranged from the early 1900s up to modern, although there was very little modern. There were sort of heavy pockets of cards in the 1930s. There was a complete 33 goudey set, a 33 DeLong set, and a bunch of other goudeys and play balls from the 30s. There was also a concentration in the late 60s, early 70s. Like there was a lot of 1968 to 1973. Those were the two heaviest concentrations, but then there were cards scattered throughout the entire collection from all years. It was, almost, like I said, almost entirely vintage, a tiny bit of modern, vast majority baseball, 80 to 90% baseball with some football, a tiny bit of basketball and non-sports as well. In terms of condition, it was mixed grade. There was some low-grade stuff, some mid-grade stuff, and some high-grade stuff. But overall, it was in much nicer condition than a standard collection you would see like this. There was a lot of mid-grade stuff from the 30s, and there was a lot of high-grade stuff from the 60s and 70s. So, there was quite a bit of grading potential. Now, I said there was 50,000 cards. A lot of that was 60s and 70s commons. But, obviously, as you can see from the pictures, there was tons and tons of stars as well. And the pictures are just a small sampling of what was included. Originally, we were just going to split the cards fairly. Like Mike paid for 2/3 of the collection. He was going to take 2/3 of the value, and I was going to take 1/3. But Mike came up with the idea shortly before, and we decided that we should do that, but also put some cards into separate piles that we would sell together. In case there was, upside with grading and other things like that. So we ultimately split the cards that day into basically 6 categories. The first category was cards for John, basically as a commission. I mean, he's the one who found the deal, and he did a lot of the initial legwork, a lot of the research as well. So he obviously deserved quite a bit off the top, and we basically told him he could take first crack at it within reason, and just take them, for free. There was absolutely no issue here. I had never done a deal with either of these two guys before. I knew them both, but I'd never done any sort of transaction. So this is the kind of thing that could get messy if, one person is greedy or two people are stubborn or whatever. But yeah, there was none of that. John wanted a lot of the cheaper stuff from the 60s and 70s. He's a set collector, set builder. So he took a bunch of non-sports, vintage non-sports and some oddball stuff and some, a bunch of cards to fill in his sets. And yeah, there was no issue there. The next two categories were what we, originally intended to do, was just split up the cards 2/3 to Mike, 1/3 to me. And we did this with the majority of the cards, certainly quantity-wise, and with all 13 of the graded cards, because they were very easy to value in the moment. So, Mike was flying, whereas I was driving, so it made more sense for me to take the bulk, which I did. And I took a couple of the graded cards. He got some of the graded cards, and we evened it all out so that it was 2/3 to him, 1/3 to me. The fourth category were cards that we felt needed to be graded. So, it made more sense to get them graded before splitting them up or selling them. So as we were going through the collection that day, any card we thought should be graded, we just put into a box. Ultimately, Mike took a bunch of them, I took a bunch of them, and we got them all graded, but we still owned them together. And there were, hundreds and hundreds of cards that fell into this category. The fifth category were raw cards for Greg Morris. And these were cards we were going to sell together through Greg Morris Cards. And they were cards that weren't quite like at the grade, they didn't quite need to be graded, but they were a lot of $5, $10, $20 level cards in this category, maybe even a little higher. So these were just going to send an order to Greg Morris and then split up the money after it had sold that way. And the final category was this overflow box, which had a lot of sort of oddball stuff that probably didn't have a lot of value, but we weren't really sure, probably needed to research it. But we just didn't have time that day. We ultimately left this box with John. He offered to research it and sell it on our behalf for a fair cut. And yeah, that's what we did. That day was incredibly fun, hanging out with Mike and John all day, talking cards, going through cards, figuring out what to do. Just a total blast. Joe, who is a Silver Jackify on YouTube, on the left, came over at one point and hung out with us as well. Mike actually sold him that Babe Ruth card he's holding. It was a 5-figure sale. And yeah, gave him a good price, but it was nice for Mike to get some of the money back. We actually did a live stream that day it's on Mike's channel, and yeah, all of it was just really, really fun. But now it's 5-ish months later, and we've basically sold through the entire collection. So let's go over the numbers in terms of how this collection panned out. We sent 2 orders of raw cards to Greg Morris. Those 2 orders had a total of 1,305 cards, and on those cards we netted just short of $13,000. That's after fees are accounted for. We sent 416 cards off for grading to PSA at various different service levels. 16 of the cards we ended up cracking because PSA, called the mini size was something that didn't make sense to us. So we cracked 16 cards and sent those to SGC. And in all 16 cases, the grades were better at SGC. Of the 416 graded cards, I kept a couple for myself. Mike actually kept a bunch as a sort of right up his alley in terms of what he collects. We also sold some each individually. I sold some on my eBay store. He sold some to his friends and his viewers. And then we sent the majority of the rest to Greg Morris to just run an auction on eBay. Here are a few of the some of the nicer grades we hit. 1970 Topps Gale Sayers got a PSA 9. Pete Rose 69 All-Star got a PSA 9. 72 Topps Willie Mays got a PSA 9. There were 2 Kareem Abdul-Jabbar rookies in there. They both got 7s. I secretly really was hoping one would get an 8, as there's a huge jump in value from a 7 to an 8, but they both got 7s, which are still obviously great grades. 1929 Cashin Babe Ruth is a really rare card. Got a 2.5. There's only I think it was like 150 or 200 ever graded with PSA. And yeah, 2.5 is a great grade for a card from the 20s. 65 Mantle got a PSA 4. 1933 Goudey Fred Lindstrom got a PSA 5. He's a Hall of Famer. That's a really nice looking 5 there. 1933 Goudey Mo Berg. This got a 2. It's a really nice looking 2, but this sold for $750. Which was way more than we were expecting to get. If you don't know the Mo Berg story, it's a good one, worth a look up. But yeah, nice surprise there. Al Kaline rookie got a PSA 4. And the biggest surprise in a good way of the whole collection really was this T205 gold border Christy Mathewson. I got a PSA 2, which yeah, that was basically the grade we were expecting. But we didn't realize when we sent it in a PSA that it's a very rare variation, a cycle 1 loss variation. The back has the Cycle Cigarettes ad, and it's an error where it shows that he only had 1 loss in 1908. He went 37-1 as a pitcher. A pretty amazing season. That's an error. He should have had more losses. But this is a very rare variation. There's only like 20 or so on the Pop Report in any grade, and we ended up selling this for $8,000, whereas we were originally expecting to get maybe $1,000 to $2,000. But the final numbers look like this. We spent $120,000 on the collection, spent just over $10,000 in grading fees, and we had $650 in other costs. Most of that is shipping to each other and various people. But total cost for the deal was just over $130,000. Our sales looked like this. The cards we sold ourselves, like the cards I took and sold myself and him the same, we had $71,740 there. The cards we sold together via Greg Morris and other routes, $76,000 plus there. So for a total sales of $148,375. That's after all fees are accounted for. That gave us a total profit of $17,615, money in versus money out, which probably doesn't sound like very much, given that we spent $130K on the deal. But there's a reason for that, which I'll get into in just a sec. If we just isolate Mike and only look at his numbers, Mike actually kept 88 cards from the collection for his PC. Here are some of the more valuable ones. 1929 Cash and Lou Gehrig. I had mentioned the Babe Ruth from that set earlier. The Gehrig is actually rare, or there's a lot fewer of them on the Pop Report. He kept one of the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar rookies, some T206s, Cy Young, Ty Cobb, Mordecai Brown, a T207 Walter Johnson PSA 4, a T205 Gold Border Tris Speaker. All those cards are very sort of nice eye appeal for the grade. Some really nice cards from the 30s. The DeLong in the upper left I had mentioned was sort of his dream card. Got an SGC 2.5. That's about a $10,000 card in that grade. I kept one of the Babe Ruths in the upper middle, another Gehrig in the upper right, a 34 Goudey, and a DiMaggio rookie and a Ted Williams rookie, both from 1939 play ball down there at the bottom. Isolating just Mike's numbers, he spent about $87,000 out of pocket on the collection. That was $80,000 for the cards, another $6,700 for grading fees, and a little extra for shipping. He sold about he received about $104,000 after all fees were accounted for in sales. About half those sales were cards he sold himself, and about half of those were cards that we had sold together. That gave him a profit of $17,000. He's up $17,000 on the deal. But remember, he also kept 88 cards, and those 88 cards have a market value, an estimated market value of close to 62 grand. So if you factor that in, his total profit was $78,870 on an $87,000 purchase. So pretty close to doubling up. Isolating just me, it looks pretty similar, although I only kept 5 cards, but those 5 cards were pretty expensive. I kept a 33 Goudey Lefty Grove PSA 5. I kept the other Kareem Abdul-Jabbar rookie PSA 7. I kept the Ernie Banks rookie SGC 7. The scratch you see across the card is on the case, not the card itself. I kept the 33 Goudey Lou Gehrig SGC 5. Beautiful card there. And then the most expensive card in the collection I actually kept, 1933 Goudey Babe Ruth card number 53 SGC 4.5. Looking at just my numbers, I spent $43,650 out of pocket. That was 40 grand for the cards, $3,300 for grading fees, and a couple $100 for other things. I received from sales $44,000 and change. That was basically $19,000 in stuff I sold for myself, and then $25,000 was my share of the cards that we sold together. That gave me a cash profit of barely $500. It basically broke even on the deal if you're talking about just money out versus money in. But like I said, I'm completely fine with that. I kept 5 cards from the collection. Those 5 cards had an estimated market value of 42 grand. So my total profit, if you factor in the cards I kept, is about $42,645, which is about $1,000 short of a double up. So going back to the total numbers on the entire deal, we spent about $130,000 on the collection. We made a profit of about 17 grand, and we got to keep about 100 grand worth of cards for our PCs. But that's it. The story of the large collection I bought with Mike Moynihan, baseball collector. And I hope everyone enjoyed. And I got to say thank you again to Mike for bringing me on the deal. Thank you again to John for finding the deal and all the work you did on it. And, getting to meet John and getting to know Mike was really the highlight of this for me. Mike and I spent countless hours on the phone discussing strategies and discussing, plans and going over PSA orders and, following Greg Morris auctions live last minute and cheering them on to see if they could go higher. It was all just really, really fun. And yeah, I hope I get to experience it again with both those fine gentlemen. But until next time, have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.